Should we take our boat on our big lap around Australia? That's the question I'm going to answer today. G'day guys, thanks for joining me for another episode of Ask Steve. Today we're going to talk about whether or not you should take your boat on your big lap around Australia. This question comes from Sean McTigue, and I'll read it out first and then we'll get stuck into it. He says, "Hi Steve, I was just wondering if you were to do the big lap now with the kids the same age, is there anything you travelled with that you would leave at home this time? Not so much with regards to clothing or smaller stuff, but bigger items such as the boat. Having watched the Big Lap series multiple times, I can see that you had some great trips on the boat, but given all the work and extra items required for the boat, such as the motor, safety equipment, etc., would you take it a second time? Love the series. Regards, Sean McTigue." So Sean, I'm going to read into that. The big question really asking here is whether or not we would take the boat if we were to do the Big Lap again. And that's a fantastic question. It's actually not the first time we've been asked that, because as you said in the Big Lap series, we did get out and have some epic days on the boat, but it is extra work. There's no doubt about it. So to answer the question in a nutshell, yes, I would, but I don't want to downplay the fact that it is extra work. You know, there is quite a bit of extra gear you've got to take with it, and you've got to find somewhere to keep it, and setting it up and packing it up does take time, and it's something you need to weigh up. So to help you to make the decision whether you want to do that for yourself, I thought I'd run through some of the things that we dealt with along the way, the gear that we had to take to have the boat, and maybe some alternatives if you don't want to take a large tinny like what we had. All right, so firstly I'll tell you how we stored our boat. It basically lived on top of our camper trailer on a dedicated boat rack, which we bought with the camper trailer. It was like an additional added extra, and it would fold up, and so when the boat's upside down on top of the boat rack, basically we could fold it up using gas struts, and it would get out of the way, and it would just basically hang on the side of the trailer, and we could set the camper trailer up on the other side. Now we also have a roof rack on the Land Cruiser, which we got from Tradesman Racks, and you can actually put the boat up on the roof rack as well. There's a couple of extra bars that you add on, and it's got some rollers on the back, so you can actually push the boat up and keep it on the roof of the car. Now that's a perfectly viable way to take your boat around the country, and plenty of people do that. And we've done trips before we had a camper trailer. We've done trips like that as well. The only real issue with that is the fact that you've got to then set up your boat and everything when you're at the water. So you can basically, you've got to get the car to right next to the water, get the boat off, and put the motor on and do all that sort of work right at the water's edge, which is okay. I mean, that's an option, but it's not super convenient. Now, the other thing we had as part of our boat setup was a collapsible boat trailer, which we got from Real Easy Trailers in Queensland. And that was great as a way to easily move the boat around when we were at an established camp. We could just have the boat sitting on the trailer, all set up, ready to go, the motor there, all the safety gear in the boat, all of our fishing gear in there, and we could just literally hook it up to the back of the Land Cruiser, tow it down, and put it in on the boat ramp, and away we went. That was fantastic. So huge amount of convenience that you get by having a trailer like that. At the start of our big lap, we actually stored the motor across a board which I bolted to the front of the drawbar on the trailer, and I strapped it down to there, so it was fairly easy to get on and off, a couple of straps, and I could basically pull it off, add it onto the boat, put it back again. The only problem was that once we hit the dirt roads, a lot of stones and gravel and dust and mud and stuff accumulated in that area. And I was finding that the motor itself was getting damaged. The paint and everything was getting damaged from all these rocks and stones and mud. So what we ended up doing is moving it inside the trailer. I basically just laid it down on its side inside the trailer, and we packed heaps of gear around it, and that basically worked fine. It got it up out of the way. It was in a clean environment where there was no dust and rocks, and it was a little less convenient than having it on the front, but still worked okay. Now, what I would prefer to do, the best option would be actually to have a way of hanging it like on a transom on either the back of the four-wheel drive on the rear bar, or on the front drawbar, around the front drawbar on the trailer. So it's upright, it's not lying down in anything. You could put a bag, you could get some sort of a bag over it to keep the dust and the rocks out. So that would be the best way to do it. I haven't done that, but in hindsight, that's what I should have done, and that's what I would do if I was going to do a big lap next week. That's the way I would go about doing it. Now, we've got 2 fuel tanks for our boat, and I keep them both on the outside of the camper trailer. You don't want to store fuel inside the trailer or inside the car, because it smells for one, but also it's dangerous. If it leaks, you can have a fire, and that's the last thing you want. Now, there's no doubt that taking a boat adds a fair bit of weight to your rig, and weight's a big issue these days, more so these days than what it was in the past, where nobody was really looking that closely. These days, the law seems to be all over people being overweight with their rigs, so it's something you do need to be very careful of. With the boat, our boat is 80 kilos, the motor's about 50 kilos, the trailer is about 55 kilos, thereabouts. And so with all the extra gear that goes with it, you're talking roughly about 200 kilos for the boat and all of its associated gear. Plus the boat rack on the trailer was roughly about 70 kilos. So you're talking you're starting to get close to about 300 kilos of extra gear to take a boat. Now ours is a fairly long tinny. It's probably about the biggest one that you could put on a rooftop. And it weighs 80 kilos. You could probably knock maybe 30 kilos out of that by getting a smaller one, but it's not going to be it's only about 10% of the overall weight of the entire setup. Ours is a 15 horsepower motor, but a smaller capacity motor is still roughly the same physical size. So you're not really going to save much weight there, maybe a few kilos, but nothing of any real consequence. So one way or another, you're looking at least 250 kilos to take a boat and all the gear that goes with it. Is it worth it? Well, from my point of view, yes, it was. Virtually all of that weight was on the trailer, and the trailer was well and truly able to cope with that. We're only taking a camper trailer, which weighed 1 point something tons with the trailer and everything in it, way lower than the weight of a caravan, and well and truly within the towing capacity of the Land Cruiser. So from my point of view, having that extra weight was no real big deal, and it was well worth it. Setting up the boat, to go and use it for a day was certainly a lot of work. You're probably talking about an hour at the morning, an hour at the end of the day to set it up and pack it up. And we did that sometimes. And yes, it was extra work, but it was worth it. But where it was really good was where we would stay at somewhere for a longer period of time, like at Coburg Peninsula, where we were for 7 days. And we had the boat, as soon as we got there, basically put the boat on the trailer, had it all set up, and we used it all the time. And getting out and exploring around the coast there, where there's just nobody there, it's an absolute deserted paradise in the tropics, was fantastic. We went out fishing, we caught a big fish, we did a catch and cook on the beach. And we didn't see another person all day. It was like we had the whole place to ourselves. Now, we couldn't have done that without our boat. There's a lot of crocs out that way. We saw them on the beach. We literally saw them floating past as we were putting the boat into the water. So there's no way we're going to be in the water with anything but a decent, solid metal boat that we felt relatively safe from the crocs from. Now, as much as I was very happy that we took our boat and would take it again next time, it wasn't without its problems. Yes, we had all the extra weight to deal with. Day to day, it was no real problem. It just folded up out of the way and it didn't really get in the way. But we did break the trailer a couple of times. 2 of the uprights that actually hold the boat rack on top of the camper trailer snapped on 2 separate occasions. One of them on our way up to Cape York. And now this one's broken. Snapped off, yeah. And the real problem with that is the fact that we couldn't lift the boat rack up out of the way, so we couldn't get the camper trailer open. And all of our bedding and everything was inside the camper trailer and basically inaccessible. So our entire trailer became useless because of the fact that we weren't able to lift up that boat rack.
Makes me think of that article that we read the other night about the casualties of camper trailers going up to Cape York.
Yeah, I think it's probably the ultimate test for them, really. We ended up driving into the night to ultimately get to Musgrave Station, where we stayed for the night in a hotel room there. And then thankfully the guys there were super helpful. And the next day I was able to weld up the trailer and get it all fixed and reinforced so that it'd be stronger. But we basically broke 2 of those uprights on the trip. So the lesson for me in that was that I needed to make them a lot stronger. Just driving around on simple roads would be no problem, and it was certainly strong enough. But once you get up into places like Cape York and these long corrugated roads, the boat's doing this on top of the trailer the whole time, and it just wears. It just weakens the metal, and eventually it breaks. Another issue we had was the gas struts that actually help you to lift it up and lower it back down again. On 2 or 3 occasions, we actually bent the struts because you'd lower the boat rack down, and if you got sort of pulled the front a bit harder than the back, it put a bit of pressure on the struts, and instead of compressing, they bowed outwards, and once they did that, they were finished. They wouldn't work anymore. So that happened at least 2 or 3 times, and we ended up having to get replacement struts sent up to us from Melbourne. See, we've got our struts. We can fix our camper trailer now.
Put it on.
Around here like that.
So the gist of it is, if you're going to take a boat and you're going to carry it on your camper trailer, you want to make sure that your boat rack is really, really reinforced and super strong, and look for any points that might be weak, that might potentially break along the way. And the other thing to do is make sure that you use some ratchet straps or something so that once it's all in place and you're going to go on a rough road, ratchet strap it down to just try to minimize the wobbling around. Now, some of the best days that we had on our big lap were actually out on our boat. You know, when we were out exploring Ningaloo Reef at Cape Range National Park in Western Australia, it was just an epically beautiful day, and you know, we were able to pull into little coves and just hang out and get out up over the reef and see turtles and things like that. Obviously, you have to take all your standard safety equipment like flares and a baler and water and rope and things like that. Definitely want to carry some spare fuel, whether you have a second fuel tank or just a, you know, like a 5-litre little fuel can that you can take. I always like to carry a spare fuel hose because I figure like that's a weak point. When we bought our boat, I bought a second fuel hose and that just lives in the spare parts bag. I'd certainly recommend you take a PLB like this one from KTI as well, so that if things do go wrong and you get stuck out there, your motor breaks down, or you know, one of any possible things goes wrong, at least you can get help. You don't want to rely on your phone. A lot of places where you go out and enjoy in your boat, getting out to those remote places, there's no phone range. So having a PLB that you can send a distress signal by satellite is definitely a highly recommended thing. I mean, you should have one of these on your trip anyway. And since you're going to have one anyway, keep it with you on the boat while you're out there. So what's some alternatives? Let's say you don't want extra 300 kilos of gear, but you do want to get out on the water. Well, obviously you can take some canoes or kayaks or even stand-up paddle boards. Just keep in mind that you're really not going to be able to put it into those northern coastal waters or estuaries or pretty much anywhere. If there's any possibility that a croc could be in that water, you don't want to be putting any boat in there that, you know, that a croc can just easily knock you out of. But there are certainly plenty of places you can use it. You know, the bottom 2/3 of the country's coastline and all the inland rivers and streams and lakes and things like that. Thanks guys, appreciate you joining me for this video and sticking around. If you want to subscribe to see these automatically next time, hit the subscribe button and hit the little bell and you'll get a notification when they come through. Please give the video a like. It helps to extend the reach and get it out there in front of more people. And if you've got a question about doing the big lap or any other big road trip related questions, send me an email at asksteve@thebiglap.tv and I'll see you in a video soon.